Okay, everyone, welcome to the Demand Gen Summit. I'm Billy Bateman, co-founder of Chat Funnels. I am joined by Kyle Woodruff, Vice President of Marketing at Immersion. Kyle, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Billy. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Before we get into it, can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Uh, Billy told you my name, Kyle Woodruff. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Immersion. And we're just a young startup out of Lehigh. And it's been an interesting and fantastic road getting here, working at companies and under great mentors at Domo, Pluralsight, uh, uh, TalkDesk, and then most recently here.
Awesome, awesome. And then you guys at Immersion, you're tackling some pretty interesting problems. Do you mind just, telling everyone what you guys do?
Absolutely. We address a very niche problem, but one that's pretty widespread and surprisingly pretty widely felt globally. But we tackle the language assessment problem. And specifically, we're an automated language assessment platform. And we have a proprietary artificial intelligence that allows organizations that have bilingual employees to use our automated engine to do language assessments and more accurately determine the proficiency of their employees.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it. As the world gets more global, that's only going to have more demand. So
Absolutely.
the topic that, as I was like, hey, I want to have you on, Kyle, you've got a lot of great knowledge to share. The topic that you wanted to share with everyone was what you consider the building blocks for creating demand and what those are based on all your experiences you've had working at a lot of tech startups. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you to lay out, what's the foundation of these building blocks?
Yeah, it's been interesting. As I mentioned, I've worked at some of the great Utah tech companies. I've had some great mentors and colleagues that have helped me, learn this along the way. And then Immersion was really my first time starting at such a young company and having to take all of those learnings at once and apply them and have really the growth of the company and of the marketing, that lead generation engine, depend on my knowledge of this. So it's been interesting to test the theories and I'll go right into what I consider to be those building blocks. First and foremost, it is the definition of your target audience, without a doubt.
Okay.
I personally have not been, I wasn't trained as a product marketer, but I found out very quickly how difficult it is to market to an audience that is not really narrowly defined. And I took a first crack at it when we got here, and thought we had done a pretty good job, and took a few steps down the road after taking our first stab at that and understanding, and found out really quickly that we had not narrowed the definition nearly narrow enough. So we're actually going through the process yet again and further narrowly defining our target audience so that we can speak to them better, so that we can better train the sales teams, so that we can better define our demand gen channels, and so that those audiences are hearing the same consistent messaging over and over and over again.
Okay. All right. I agree with you that this has definitely got to be one of the building blocks, but you're talking about, hey, I thought I had the audience. I'm going down the road. I didn't quite have it. I think a lot of startups have taken that where they're like, okay, this is our audience. And then we realize maybe it's not. What are some techniques, or how'd you come to realize, hey, this isn't our audience, and our audience is actually this is what we probably need to be focusing on?
Yeah, there's definitely there's a little bit of the creative side of it and a lot of the science side of it. I'm very much a data-driven marketer. It's a terrible,
Yeah.
really cliche thing to say, but the fact of the matter is the data will tell you where you're winning. And as we started into putting resources behind our marketing efforts, the data told me really quickly what titles we were winning with, what messaging was winning, what type of organizations and industries we were winning in, the size of the companies, and frankly, the geographies as well. Being a language assessment program, that was one of the challenges I had, is we are instantly a global offering. And frankly, our primary markets are outside there for their people that learn English as a second language. So, the world is our oyster. Where do I start? And it's not easy to narrow down the world geographically, but extremely important because our messaging should have cultural specific messaging included in it. Working in the Philippines is very different than working in Europe, which is very different than working in Latin America countries. So that was definitely a part of it. And the data was really what helped guide me into where we define our audience.
Great. I mean, I love it. I'm with you. Let's look at the data. Let's see who's actually buying, who's responding, and let's focus in on those. So what's your next building block after defining your audience?
Next one is the messaging. We talked about defining the audience. Messaging is the second one, and really finding value-based, needs-based messaging instead of feature-focused messaging. And you hear it all the time. You hear it as a marketer all the time, but it's different in practice when you're crafting the messaging and training the sales teams and then turning around and selling that. It's really difficult to turn a team away who's so used to focusing on those features and feature selling to make that entire shift into needs and benefits and value-based selling.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. It's tough to get away from, here's all these cool features that we have. I know sometimes I'll overhear our new sales reps and they'll be like talking about this feature. I'm like, dude, this is not good. Like, and the call doesn't go well. And I'm like, okay, like, let's talk about the value. Like, I take it upon myself. Like, I didn't do a good enough job of like, here's the value and the solution and the problems. Let's not just talk about features.
This year we actually started a monthly demo, an open monthly demo. It's open to any of the sales teams to invite anybody they want to. And then of course, marketing is going to drive traffic there as well. And we finally got that demo to shift into a value-based demo, which took quite a few practice sessions to get used to. But with hands down, it has been our highest converter. And we had about 60 people register. We had about 40 people attend, and we had over 20 people set up appointments with us afterwards. It was our very first value-based, story-driven demo, which was a completely foreign. We have the sales reps do the demo for us. So it was very foreign, and took a lot of sessions to get there, but it by far our best results yet.
That's amazing. If you had half the people who attended set a follow-up appointment, like at that point, I'd say like, hey, you've nailed it. Like, of course, always keep looking to get better, but that's amazing. Congratulations.
Our SDRs are loving it. They hit quota off one event, which they're not complaining about. So they're asking for more now.
I'm sure they are. Okay. So we've talked about defining an audience and then getting that problem and the value that you're bringing to that audience. What's the next step in your building blocks for driving demand?
Yeah, next, especially when demand is at the forefront, is identifying and really developing a strong mix of lead gen channels. And I've got some stories, plenty of stories I can tell you behind that, but I kind of grew through the ranks on the field marketing side of those channels. So developing events and field marketing sources as sources of channels, but I've always worked really closely with good friends and colleagues on the digital side. And, we have had experienced times when resources were all diverted to digital channels. And likewise, when resources were all diverted too heavily over to the field side. And the problem that we run into or that we did run into, is that when that happened and circumstances out of your control affect those channels, if you're not evenly distributed across all of them, your lead sources dry up, your pipeline dries up, and what's getting fed into the sales teams and the inside sales teams, the SDRs, all dry up. So and it's been a challenge here at Immersion, starting from nothing. When I came to Immersion, we didn't have any lead sources, not one. And so identifying the channels that are going to be the most effective for us has been a lot of trial and error. You lean back into those sources that you have experience with, but it's been a lot of trial and error, and then keeping those evenly distributed so that our monthly leads don't dry up, so that we experience as little of the ups and downs as possible, has definitely been a challenge, but absolutely just solidified in my mind that even distribution and solidifying, really finding strong lead sources across multiple mediums is an absolute essential for a strong lead gen program.
Okay. Yeah. Dude, that makes sense. You gotta spread it out across different channels. You can't put all of your eggs in one basket. So, let me ask you a question though. Is like going back to the Domo example where you guys, you've got heavy field marketing, a lot of digital. So where, you were running the field side of things. What did you ever feel like, hey, there's like a conflict here where I need more money and digital's getting the money, but I'm actually getting the leads that close?
Depends on who you ask that question.
Okay.
Whose leads are better? Whose leads have better close rates?
That's
we
always
ran
the
into it all the
question.
time. We ran into it all the time, and field always felt like we had to justify our spend, and we had to go handhold our leads through the marketing funnel and through the sales funnel, and to make sure that we found every single one that came from a field source. We found every single one that closed so that we could justify our spend. Especially as we moved, I mean, this was 10 years ago. So especially as we're moving into digital becoming king, and in digital getting so much more of the budget. Luckily, I had great colleagues on the digital side, who both of us, and I'll go back to data, and data being so important, and data really being one of those building blocks. Without that visibility and without that data and without that collaboration across those channels, you really don't know. You're guessing. And you're doing your best to justify your existence and your job, when really, if you don't have that data, you can't, there's no way to know for sure. So having that visibility and the ability to track back to all the touch points, and to really see that mix of channels and how they each make contact with those leads and touch those leads all the way through the funnel, is essential to see the value in each of those channels.
Yeah, I agree. Like that sounds like you guys had a good relationship. It's not always the case, but let's go back to the digital side of things. Now, you're just not over field, like you're over everything there at Immersion. And we've had the shift, like, hey, last 12 months, you can't really do field events for the most part, So with digital, what do you see as the building blocks there? Like, what should you be doing from a digital perspective?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with data on the digital side, because regardless of what channels you're using, if you don't know what's converting, and if you don't know the audience that you're touching through whatever channels, it's not going to matter. So we, again, we started from scratch when I came to Immersion. And when I came to Immersion, we had a book of business, but that book of business was not the target audience we were going after. So we had to understand what traffic was coming to the website, where they were coming from, how they were getting there. And then I had to do everything I could to get them to attract a completely different audience. Because they weren't driving revenue. And the example is, we have over 600 universities as customers of Immersion. They use us for student placement in their language programs.
Okay.
So as a result, those universities are all driving their student traffic to our website, even though it's not the right place to go.
Yeah.
So number one, I had to identify who was coming to the site, and I had to find a solution to kind of divert that traffic to a channel that made sense for them, but kind of away from the main purpose that I wanted for the site, which was to be lead generation and lead development. And then it was a lot of experimentation, daily stand-ups on what traffic's coming to the site, what keywords they're searching on, um, you know, paid media channels, our paid social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, which are bringing traffic, the right traffic to the site, and then making sure we have the right objectives defined early so that we knew not only who's coming to the site, but what actions they're taking on the site, and ultimately who's getting all the way through to our end goals. And then once we found those veins, starting to lean into those veins.
I love it, man. I love it. So with the data that you're looking at, like, you know, you're always trying to figure out who's the right people that we should care about that are coming to our site. Not an uncommon problem to have people that aren't your customers going to your website. Most of us have it, you know, for whatever reason, whether they're looking for a job or just doing some research, you know. We got to figure out who's actually our buyer. What metrics do you really look at and do you track? Like, what are the metrics that you care about for demand gen?
Yeah, I'll start with the basic marketing funnel. Looking at overall, in general, regardless of channel, looking at overall leads generated, the channels that they're coming from, and then each of those conversion metrics through the marketing funnel. So defining very clearly with your sales leadership what a marketing qualified lead is, what a sales qualified lead is, where the handoffs are between marketing and sales, and where the handbacks are. And once we had that defined, and that was the first thing I did when I got here. Once we have that defined, then that gives me those measurements, those KPIs that I need to understand how effective each channel is. So that was number one. And then, of course, tracking that all the way through the sales pipeline as well, so that we can understand how each of those impact revenue. That was number two. When it comes to digital marketing, obviously there are a much more specific subset of KPIs as there are with field marketing channels that we track. But without those higher level shared KPIs between marketing and sales defined early, without those, the rest of those metrics don't mean a lot because you don't understand how that impacts pipeline and revenue.
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you one question on, you talked about, where's that handoff between marketing and sales? For you guys, how do you define that? Where is that handoff? Is it, MQL? Is it a demo set? Like, where is it?
I think we're still working on it.
Okay.
I don't know if we've defined it. It changes all the time.
All right.
But and I think it's probably that ongoing conversation and kind of tug of war between marketing and sales. The definition of what a qualified lead is, and is it really qualified? And the leads we're calling, you say they're qualified, but they're not when we talk to them. So it's a constant struggle. But for us, we have our marketing qualified leads is where we hand that off to our inside sales team, and we define based on the target demographics of our ideal customer. We define what those demographics are, and then we put lead scoring in place so that each one of those receive a certain number of points, and then they have to reach a threshold before I can hand those off to sales.
I love it.
So that's the most important one. That's also the biggest moving target, is kind of, the value that's assigned to each of those interactions, each of those demographic marks, and what the right threshold is before we hand that off to sales.
Awesome. Okay. We're running out of time. So I got one more question for you, Kyle. Are you more in the camp of let's do things and like do them really well, almost to perfection, or more of like let's just do stuff and let's see what sticks and what works?
I actually have that in one of in my notes of things to talk to you about if you ever ask. So I'm prepared for this one. I'm definitely an 80-20 rule. I am get 80% of the way there and then go, because you're never going to guess perfectly. You're never going to get it right.
No.
So if you can get 75, 80% of the way there and you have pressure tested that a few times, then go, because the rest of those learnings are going to come in stride and you have to be able to pivot quickly. You can't be too set in any of your ways. You have to be able to learn along the way, be able to build the ship a little bit as you're flying it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. If anyone wants to get in contact with you and continue the conversation, Kyle, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, email is the best way to do it. It's kyle.woodruff@immersion.ai. You can jump on our website and contact me through our contact us there as well, or jump on any of our social channels. All of them Immersion AI, and you can get a hold of us that way as well.
Awesome. Okay, Kyle, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I love it.
Appreciate it, Billy. Thanks.